Welcome to this screen capture looking at the first lesson on a watery world. The aim of this is to look at how is water consumed around the world and look at reasons behind why it is as well. So I'm going to start off with just a short video. We're just going to look at what is the basic problem with water around the world.
Anything you can think of to grow food for human health, to sustain our ecosystems, to make the goods and services that we need. And yet it's the 21st century and there are a billion people without access to safe drinking water. And as you said earlier, more than 2 billion without access to adequate sanitation services. We've really failed in the 21st century to meet the most basic human needs for water, and it leads to a lot of bad things.
And that's a very key point that you bring out. You lay the failure at the doorstep of government, at the doorstep of humanity, as opposed to those that are saying, this is climate change, there's a finite supply of water. Is that clear?
Well, first of all, there certainly is a finite supply of water, and unfortunately climate change is going to significantly affect our water resources. But the responsibility for providing safe drinking water for everyone is, I guess, ultimately a governmental responsibility. Certainly in the richer nations of the world, governments have provided safe municipal water supply and sanitation systems that collect wastewater and treat it before we put it back in our rivers and streams. And the failure to meet basic human needs for everyone is to some degree a governmental failure.
So when we look at that 1 billion people without, more than 1 billion people without access to clean drinking water, how does that break down geographically? Where are those people? Where is the mass of those people, as it were?
Well, unfortunately, as one might expect, the vast majority of people without access to basic water services are in Asia and in southern Asia and in parts of Africa, sub-Saharan Africa in particular. As you might expect, it's the poorest people of the world who are missing this most fundamental resource.
According to UN Panel on Climate Change, by 2050, up to 2 billion people worldwide could be facing a major water crisis if governments continue to take this business as usual attitude. What I want to know is, why aren't more people up in arms about this? I mean, why is this so undercover, so to speak?
So the idea of watching that was to give us an idea about the basic problem, and the things they were talking about were the fact that you've got issues with water supply around the world, you've got a growing global population, and the fact that there isn't necessarily enough water or enough money available to make this water available to everybody. And some of the most significant problems which they were discussing are clearly going to be occurring in LICs. So let's look at the issues behind this. Now, here we've got a map of the world water issues. What I'd like you to do is just make a few notes looking at the various water issues around the globe. Just pick out two areas, probably pick out say either North America or Europe, and then compare it with either Asia or Africa, and just look at the variations which exist between the water issues in the world. You can see that we've got some significant problems where you've got HICs which either have 3.5% or 0% with people without drinking water, compared to in the African nations you've got 39.3%. That's over 1/3 at risk of water shortage, not having clean water. And climate change is then going to make this situation worse, with at least 25 countries facing water shortage by 2025. And this is some real problems, and they don't necessarily have the money to deal with that. You've got similar issues also occurring in Asia, but then you also have to look at the amount of water which farming is using to actually support this and back this up. So take 5 minutes, read through this slide, and just make a few notes to compare what the water issues are in the HICs compared to the LICs. Don't worry about all the points, just focus on two of them. So this leads us on to looking at where all our water comes from, and this is just a quick reminder of the water cycle and how our water moves around. The Earth's water is a closed system, and that means that all the water we have in it now, we had a billion years ago, and consequently it's how this water is being used and where this water is being stored. And we've got lots of different areas where water is being stored. You've clearly got clouds, you've got it in the ground, you've got the oceans, you've got it in the air, and you've also got it in the trees and the vegetation as well. But the way we're using this water is changing, and it's the threats which human consumption and raising human consumption is putting on this water that is one of the real problems. So, what is all this water used for? Well, the water's used in three main areas. Okay, number one, we've got farming. farming is used around the globe to enable us to feed the world population, and it's becoming more intensive, and the more intensive it becomes, the more water it's going to be consuming to use it. Second up, we have industry. Now, the growing of global industry means that there is more and more water being used for cooling purposes, for consumption purposes, for manufacturing purposes, that is becoming more and more important. And then the third reason is domestic water use, and you can see here the range of different aspects that domestic water is used for, and we're going to be exploring these issues a lot later on, but you need to keep these three main areas in your mind: farming, industry and domestic. Sometimes we call farming agriculture as well. So these three areas combine to produce global water consumption, and that takes us to these graphs. Okay, and these three graphs represent how water consumption varies. Now, this is an old exam question, and you can see the idea of what they're using the water for, and you can see a large variation between the two different areas. So the kind of question which they're going to ask for this is describe the difference in water consumption between highly industrialised and less industrialised countries, and that's worth 4 marks. Now, the key concept here is that it's describe. What I want you to do is just pause the video, and I'd like you to answer that question, making sure that you're using data, because that's what's going to be expected of you, and whatever you do, don't explain why at any point in time for this question. So pause the video and answer the question for what you need to do. Okay, so the question is why. We've seen what the water consumption is. Now we're going to think about why this water is being consumed. So what we're going to ask you to do is, you've been given a handout in your lesson today. The kind of question you're going to be asked is the question that's on the screen here: outline why levels of water consumption varies between HICs and LICs. What I want you to do is read through your handout, and then in a format of your choosing, so you can do it as a table, you can do it as a series of paragraphs, I want you to explain why water consumption differs between HICs, and you need to explain factors for industry, factors for agriculture, and factors for domestic use. Okay, and that will finish off this video session. The last screen which I'm going to show you is just going to be the specification, and you can see where everything which we've been looking at today comes up in the specifications. So we've looked at the differences between low income and high income countries, water consumption through domestic, agriculture and industry, and then we've just picked up on the different aspects, so domestic, agriculture and industry, and developed those in more detail. So if you can make sure that you're filling in your notes and you've written out probably between half a side to a side on why levels of water consumption varies between HICs and NICs.